All right, everybody, welcome back to Skywatchers Radio, back from break, and with our main event guest. That's right, the one, the only, a gentleman who has been on my mind for years to have on this show or any other show I've been on, because I'm a huge follower of what he's been able to do for the last decade plus. Dr. Michael Heiser is finally on the air with us. Welcome to Skywatchers Radio, sir. Welcome.
Thanks for having me.
I know it's a crazy amount of people on the line right now, and a lot of people are listening in. A lot of folks, find you controversial because of your background. First time I heard of you was on Art Bell's show, calling out the famous Zecharia Sitchin, which I talked about earlier on the show, and of course, it's very controversial to say anything about Zecharia Sitchin. People really hold on to his beliefs like his religion. But what you did years ago completely inspired me and turned me around on the whole Planet X theory and the Anunnaki and Sitchin's work. That was awe-inspiring to find out that it was all a big hoax and a lie. And the way you did it was just masterful. Can you tell the audience a little bit about how you started going in on Sitchin and how you got interested in talking about what he was working on?
Yeah, it's kind of a weird story, because the way I sort of got drawn into all this officially. I mean, I'd always been interested in UFOs and paranormal stuff and things like that. Again, sort of a peripheral kind of lurker. And when I essentially dumped my dissertation for a year, the first year of what should have been my Ph.D. dissertation, and wrote a novel called The Facade, well, that, long story short, I eventually got on Coast to Coast because of that novel. And I was familiar with Coast because I'd listened to it while I was in grad school the whole time. And there's nothing in the novel specifically about Sitchin, but when I got on that show and some other shows, it kept coming up all the time. And so I thought, well, I need to know who this guy is. I mean, I knew who Von Daniken was and things like that, but so I looked for him, and at first I thought, wow, a kindred spirit. He's talking about ancient languages and all this sort of stuff. And then when I got into his work, it's like, holy cow, this. This is a bad freshman paper. It was
red flags everywhere, wasn't it?
Oh, it was one of those things where I don't even know where to start, because I could just see problems everywhere. And so what I did, again, it might have been a little naive, but I created a website, and I didn't really know exactly what I was doing, but it was the internet was young, and stupid people like me who thought we could actually put up a decent site did so, and either succeeded or failed in whatever area. So I put up this site called sitchiniswrong.com, which still exists, and I went through basically the core items of his mythology. And again, I like to say it this way: I am what Sitchin claimed to be. I mean, this is my field. I mean, when you go to grad school, you got to take all these languages,
right.
Semitic stuff, and so I could evaluate very narrowly at that point what his language claims were, and sort of things like that. And the site has developed over the years. I mean, if you go up there now, you'll see really exciting things like me going to the electronic, text corpus of Sumerian literature online. I made a screen capture video. You can watch me with the mouse, and I find the site, and I type in, Anunnaki, and I hit the button, and you get all of the occurrences of the term Anunnaki in the cuneiform tablets, and then you hit the little TR for translate. In other words, you can check up on me.
Right.
It's boring video. There's no special effects. There's no CGI.
In fact, you made a comment on one of your videos that this is not the stuff you do if you want to get girls.
Right. And I was fortunately married, before I was doing stuff like that. But I would do stuff like that to basically show, look, I don't want this, to be like it's Mike versus. I want you to just know where the data exist, and then go look. I mean, the stuff's out there on the web. I mean, I canned searches through the Hebrew Bible and put the PDFs up there. Anybody who's followed me for any amount of time knows that I'm big on directing people to primary sources. That usually kills the conversation.
Yes.
And that's why I do it, because I want when a claim is made about a primary source, well, it would make sense to go look at the primary source to see, if this is up to snuff or not. But, your listeners should, if I'm new to them, I mean, I'm not Philip Klass here. I mean, I want, to believe in extraterrestrials. I think it would be just neat, the next best thing to slice bread, that kind of thing. I'm a biblical scholar. I'm not offended in any way by the idea of extraterrestrial life. It doesn't upset any theological apple carts for me. I mean, it's fascinating stuff. And so I separate the serious stuff, what I think of as serious ufology, away from this rather cartoonish,
goofiness,
ancient aliens wackiness stuff. To me, they're different. They're different realms.
Which we'll get to that in a second. Here, go ahead, Alan. Now,
quick question, Michael, or Doctor, whichever you want me to call you tonight.
Doctor?
Mike is fine. I used to tell students they could call me Mike or Your Holiness, and it was usually Mike.
What's your opinion on the Pope just recently announcing that he believes the Big Bang Theory is actually accurate and true?
I think it's yesterday's news. I mean and I mean like not yesterday's news, like a century ago's news. Within both Catholicism and Protestantism, there's very wide acceptance of Big Bang Theory, evolutionary theory. The theological issue for people, whether they're Christians or conservative Jews or Muslims or whatever, is the initial causation. In other words, we don't have a problem with evolution. We do have a problem if it's totally naturalistic. In other words, you leave God out of the equation.
Divine intervention is what is.
Well, I'll give you an example. When I was at Wisconsin in graduate school, the church I went to there was a campus church, and it was heavily dominated by people in the hard sciences. It was really rare to find a grad student or a professor in the humanities like me. I mean, we had the head of environmental studies was in our church. We had the head of the botany department. We had 2 research physicists who worked in the super collider. We had an entomologist. We had a geologist. I mean, it was just so dominated by the hard science people, and all of them were serious Christians. And they all believed in, they would either call it theistic evolution or evolutionary creationism or something like that, where God was the initial cause of the Big Bang. And after that, it's like, well, duh. They just had no problem with it at all. And so since I've been around a lot of those kind of people, it's kind of silly when I hear that, this evolution is just going to crush theism. Like, really? I mean, you're so underinformed if you're thinking about that. It's kind of the equivalent of the fundamentalist who's never been exposed to Christian scholarship in this area that doesn't take like a literal 24-hour day view. It's just underexposure.
Now, this is insane, by the way, and I mentioned this earlier. I am an atheist, but I tend to agree with just about everything that Michael is saying, especially when it comes to the languages. Because we were talking about this earlier, Mike, off air, and there's certain truths that escape whether you believe in God or not. And the Hebrew language, the way that you talked about the mistakes that Zecharia was making, that right there is where the truth is, right?
Yeah. When it comes to Sitchin, I mean, not everybody's in this bucket, but when it comes to what Sitchin is doing, there are a few items, and I would say that the minority of the issues I have with Sitchin are about translation. The core ideas, it's worse than that. What I'm actually saying on the website, and some of these parts of the website I've talked about, like me searching for Anunnaki, is that his core ideas, such as the Anunnaki are from Nibiru, like Nibiru is their home port or home planet or whatever it is, and Nibiru is a planet beyond Pluto, and I mean, you will not find a single tablet that associates the Anunnaki and Nibiru. That's just one example. So it's not that we're quibbling about translation. I'm literally saying it doesn't exist.
Doesn't exist, right.
So, I mean, how easy would it be for someone to shoot off, to me in an email the tablet number, the chapter and verse, so to speak, tablet number and line. Well, here's one that has, Nibiru beyond Pluto, or here's one that mentions the Anunnaki with Nibiru. How easy would that be to basically just make Mike go away?
Right.
If it existed. And so I'm saying, look, the core ideas just literally aren't there. And, when you get beyond that, it's like he's making mistakes with Hebrew grammar. Language is, like you said, language is what it is.
Now, and let me ask you, do you think this was a mistake, or do you think some of this was done on purpose? Because when we, moving forward out of Zecharia for a second, when I saw the Ancient Aliens Debunked video that you took part in also, when, these guys were like flat out lying.
Yeah, I it's hard for me to look at Sitchin as being that bad, that flawed in terms of character.
Well, I gotta ask the question: how many of them as Andrew was saying about watching Ancient Aliens Debunked, how many of these people do you think were actually outright lying, or just a little bit on the misinformed side, or just not educated well enough on the other perspectives of what they were looking at?
I think there is some out and out fabrication. There's obviously a spectrum, but what I think the real crime here is that we've got a cash cow here, and we're just not going to look at mistakes we might be making. We're not going to do objective research in preparation for an episode we're not going to fact check anything. We're going to just spout this idea, and we're going to put some object that doesn't have any inscription, and we're just going to call it this, and we're going to say it originated over here at this time. We're going to present this picture of this object that actually exists, and then we're going to take all these data points that sort of surround it or aren't even related, and we're just going to stitch them together, and we're going to have a narrative. Now that to me is deceptive. So I think there is a character element in here, but with Sitchin, I think in some cases he sort of latched on to an idea and just loved it, convinced himself of it. I don't think he studied any of these ancient languages. The mistakes are just too fundamental. And he was Jewish.
This is the point, though, because he doesn't have any documentation ever that proved that he was a scholar of any of this stuff, right? I know, and I've looked around for it a lot, and I would think if it existed, somebody would have sent it to me and said, "Ha ha," That, yeah. It's not there. Now he was a journalist, and he was Jewish. I have to assume that he could read Hebrew, but here's the problem. I have 4 kids. Okay, all of them can sight read English. Okay, I don't know that many of them could do grammatical analysis of anything they read. That's an entirely disciplined system. Explain the grammar to me. Talk about the semantics. Talk about the syntax. Talk about the verb tenses. That's the kind of stuff that when you're in the field of ancient texts, this is what you have to do. Right. It's textual analysis. So that's a lot different than being able to read a language. And so I think part of what Sitchin does is in that category. I assume he could read. I don't know that for a fact, but I assume he could. But when it comes to making points of analysis, like when he says Elohim is a plural word and it always refers to plural gods and stuff like that. Right. That is just flat out wrong. Right.
No, you're right. It is flat out wrong. I went to a yeshiva for a large portion of my early years. So, yeah, he definitely got that one wrong.
And I don't know how to explain that. If you're a Hebrew speaker, you should know that, even if you can't do grammatical analysis, because it's your language, and you have to have things like subject-verb agreement. And if you're Jewish, you're going to be exposed to the Hebrew Bible at some point.
Absolutely.
I don't really know. Since I can't psychologize him, and I tried to avoid doing that. I tried to stick to the flaws in the work. I don't really know, but my gut tells me he's not as bad as what we're seeing today, even though people use his material. Well, he inspired
the people that are today, like him and Eric Van Daniken.
That's true. That's true, and a lot of people have run with it. And I think it's exponentially more the cash cow.
Who do you think is worse, though, in the long run, him or Van Daniken, when it comes to making these things up?
I actually think Von Daniken is, because Von Daniken included that, I think, a fairly sinister racist element in his ancient astronaut theory. And I don't see Sitchin doing that. I mean, there are places where Sitchin even tries to sort of talk positively about the God of Israel and things like that. But right. Von Daniken, I mean, his personal history is very checkered. He's got this, the Africans in Egypt, that was just a flawed genetic experiment. I mean, he says things like this, and I don't see Sitchin doing that.
Yeah, I agree. Sitchin, he was a little bit more cookie cutter. One thing that I believe that really gave him a little bit more credibility with a lot of folks was when NASA entertained the idea of Planet X years ago, and he has a couple interviews that he actually went to NASA and they spoke about the possibility of being a 10th planet out there. I think that lent a lot of credibility to Sitchin. Yeah,
it's a classic example of correlation not being causation.
Right, exactly.
Well, don't forget also that a lot of the other thing that NASA pointed out was a lot of the stars that we see out there are actually binary star systems.
Right.
And they've actually hypothesized that we are actually part of a binary system. The problem is that
can't find it. Yeah.
It's not that we can't find it. It's a brown dwarf, which really isn't something that's easy to find. So with a brown dwarf and maybe one or two planets orbiting that because of the gravity.
It's an interesting. The conversation here is interesting in that it shows how Sitchin was able, after a book or two, was able to sort of draw on catastrophism, the old Velikovskian models, for some of his things. So Sitchin is actually fairly eclectic as well, in what he's. Where he's going, where he eventually went, I guess is the best way to say that, as other ideas accrued, to his initial work. But, I think, he, and it may have been his publisher. I mean, I wasn't reading him in 1978 when 12th Planet came out, but on his books, I don't know about the original.
I was 1 year old. I wasn't reading him either. So.
Yeah. But the books will make the claim that he's an ancient language scholar and stuff like that.
Right.
Well, I mean, you never saw that with Von Daniken, and so it creates this air of credibility, to what's being said. And frankly, like I said, this isn't stuff that you do to get girls. I mean, how many people go into this stuff? I mean, these departments, reality check here. My department at the UW was small. Okay?
Yes.
I mean, it's not like people are fighting to get in to do Hebrew and Semitic studies,
Yeah, but you're going to get girls with the scary cat lady women.
Oh my!
Let's sorry.
Let's just not go there.
Okay. Well, hold on one second, Alejandro. You're still on, right? Alejandro, are you still there? Or
he might have muted himself.
He might have muted himself.
Yeah.
Okay.
I did mute myself. I am here.
Okay, for all of us here who have been to UFO conferences and other conventions, would we all agree? And I'm not trying to stereotype or anything, folks.
Oh,
really,
of course, not.
Tell me, how many of the women that you do see there come off like that scary cat lady?
At the UFO Congress, the women are beautiful. They are gorgeous.
You know what they say on the internet? You know the famous quote on the internet: "Pics or it didn't happen." Show me
That's
pics
true.
or it didn't happen.
I do believe that chicks are into UFOs.
All right. There's a lot of cat ladies there.
I've seen some strange things. I'll just leave it at that. It's a distinct minority. It's a distinct minority.
We are a distinct minority.
Well, I know, but it's a minority within a minority.
I'm Cuban, so I'm definitely a minority. Now,
I don't know what the word is for that, but
Cuban. Yeah.
No, distinct minority within a minority.
A minority within a minority. Yeah. There should be a word for that.
Nerd. I don't know.
Micro minority.
There, micro minority. There, I like that. Now, speaking of minorities, or people in general. Did you go and get attacked by anybody after you started coming at Zecharia Sitchin? Like, did you find some of his big supporters or fans? Did they come at you at all at some of these lectures? I mean, did you find that there was any negative blowback from you coming out and pretty much tearing his entire theory apart?
Well, I've only had what I would call negative. I've only had one negative experience, and that was, I'm not going to name the conference because I don't want to, stigmatize it. But
every conference is a good conference.
Yeah,
correct. Another excellent answer. But I did go to a conference, and the person I think, well, I don't think it was obvious they didn't vet me, and so I gave them the titles when they asked me to speak, what I'm going to speak on, and one of them was Sitchin's material. And I went in there and basically just dismantled, but the people in the room were okay. I mean, I could tell they were disturbed, but they were okay. But the people who organized the conference refused to remunerate me as we had agreed, and basically told me I would never be back again. So,
I will tell you, Michael, it is like finding out that Santa Claus is not real. When I saw your work, I was like, my God, I've been lied to yet again. First Santa Claus and the Easter Bunny, now Zecharia Sitchin. I cannot believe this has happened to me again. It is kind of like that feeling. I can imagine the people sitting there, the faces must have been like deers caught in headlights, huh?
Well, there was definitely some of that, and there was a small sort of pro-peanut gallery there, in the way back, close to the exit.
True or false? Were you wearing a bulletproof vest that night? True or false?
No, I was not. I was not. Again, just a little naive, but I mean, you go to. I like UFO conferences. No.
Alejandro,
That's terrible.
Well, I given the context, I understood, and I wasn't going to complain about it, but it was what it was. But I've never had anything like that happen since. I mean, I don't do a lot of conferences. I mean, I tend to go where I'm invited, and now this year I'm going to go to the UFO conference, or next year I should say, in February. But I'm not speaking there. I'm just going to go as an attendee. But usually if I go, it's because somebody's asked me to do something. I actually like UFO conferences. I tell, because I get the question on both sides. I refer to myself as the equal opportunity offender. I get it from the religious crowd too. The Christian crowd, like, what in the world are you doing? Why do you go to these events? Why do you do this goofy stuff? And both from academics and the normal people. And I tell them, look, I love to go to UFO conferences because people there, you can have a better discussion about spiritual things there than you can in church in most cases.
True. Is this where I say amen?
Yeah, you can say amen, yes. But and I say because they're used to thinking about big picture questions.
Right.
And they enjoy that. Who are we? How do we get here? What's my destiny? Do I have a purpose? All these major, they're all inherently theological. But,
spiritual
they're
and
primed.
are two different things.
Yeah, they are, especially structurally. But they are primed, to get into these conversations. And I like going to them. It certainly doesn't trouble me, but I actually enjoy it.
You're the perfect person to ask this question. What are your feelings on this report? And actually, I teased about this earlier in the show, and I really wanted to touch base on it or talk about it, so I'm glad I remembered. But what are your feelings on Professor Brian Cox saying that alien life is all but impossible and humanity is unique?
Yeah, the rare earth, hypothesis.
Right.
I think, to be fair, we have to say that there are data that, again, if you're just looking at those data, that would suggest that. But I don't think it's fair to say that data has won the day. I think that's definitely premature. I would look at a statement like that and think of it the way I think of the Drake equation,
right,
which to me is pretty much useless. I know it has this sanctified status now, but I agree with Michael Crichton here, the late Michael Crichton, who basically said that the Drake equation is useless because here you have an equation where someone invented the components to the equation and assigned values to each component that are not the result of empirical analysis. In other words, it's a guess.
Right.
It's made up.
It's a theory.
It's a theory.
Right.
And so to look at the Drake equation and say, oh, this proves something, to me is sort of the other side of looking at the data that suggests, a really slim likelihood, of life elsewhere, at least as far as we can measure it or where we're measuring it. I think that's premature.
No, I agree. No, but wouldn't you agree also, Michael, that just about almost every scientific breakthrough has been really just theories that have gone over, like even Einstein's theory of relativity. It's a theory, we're pretty close to understanding the entire thing, but everything is theorized in science first. So why couldn't this be a theory that could be proven? Alien, life out there could be proven, even if it's microbial life. The thing is, would there be intelligent life? That's really the question. Intelligent life that knows how to think, how to reason, how to build ships, how to fly through space. Mm-hmm. That is the grand question. I think there is life teeming all over the cosmos, but intelligent life, that's the question, really.
It is, and that's really what everybody's angling for. But I think, and this might disturb people in the audience, or they might totally agree. I mean, who knows? But like in my novels, I get to explore a lot of these sorts of things, and there's a conspiratorial bent there. And in that material, I basically suggest fairly loudly in some places that it wouldn't matter, because as soon as one microbe is discovered, people are already predisposed to connect that dot to a whole host of other ones.
Right.
And so if you were somebody sinister within the military-industrial complex, or some intelligent evil that's not human, or whatever spiritual view, I mean, if you're any of the bad guys, whatever gaps, whatever buckets they're in, you could very easily manipulate people with just one little data point like that, and you could create a herd, and you could direct that herd, to whatever other decisions, whatever other things you want them to think. So I think that shows that what everybody's really after, they want the intelligent life thing answered, and they're so ready for it. And I want this to be valid too. I mean, again, in my lifetime, I have a small list of things that, boy, I'd like to know if this is this or that. And this is on that list.
It really is one of the most important questions that mankind could possibly answer. Are we alone?
Yeah.
Not only are we alone, but are they intelligent like us? I mean, that's a heck of a question.
Yeah, and so I'm there wanting proof for this, and that's also the danger, because the more you want it, and the more you really assign sort of, like you use the term, kind of religious qualities to it. The human propensity is to evaluate the claims less,
right?
Because of the direction that you want it to go, and I think that's a danger. It's also why in today's conservative Christian world, the question of ET life is sort of viewed negatively, whereas even just a couple centuries ago, it was actually viewed very positively, and that's because in today's world, the discussion can't happen without marrying it to, and I don't think this is necessary at all, but it happens, without marrying it to naturalistic evolution. We found this microbe, therefore aliens exist, and they got here just like we did, there is no God, and all this kind of stuff. Well, those are all non sequiturs,
right?
But they're going to be the way that either certain people think or something is presented. And so people who are religious and have a reasonably high view of the Bible get troubled by that. And that bothers me, because I don't see any of those things as necessarily connected.
Would you say that there's any indication at all in any of the religious works, Bible or the Torah or anything, that could indicate any alien intervention whatsoever?
Well, in intervention, I don't see that, but alien
or at
presence,
least interaction or presence, right?
Presence or existence. Existence is the big umbrella one here. Yeah, there are actually places that let's say that. I mean, I'm not the guy.
There's
teaching.
a stack of Old Testament references.
Yeah. Well, my go-to place would actually be New Testament. There are a couple places in Hebrews, the book of Hebrews in chapter 11. There's one in Hebrews chapter 1 that talks about God making the world and things like that. If you actually look in the Greek text, that the term translated world in those verse references is actually plural. Now, grammatically and semantically, there's a way to look at that and not conclude that more than one is meant. It's a language issue, but you can certainly look at that and say that more than one is meant. I mean, you can get that from those passages, and so if tomorrow ET lands on the White House lawn and say, hey, we aren't alone and all that sort of thing, it's like it's very easy theologically to say, well, I guess the plural form of the word there was meant to tell us, meant to inform us, even though our minds didn't go there initially, was meant to tell us that there are other worlds.
Right.
I mean that's easy to do, but again, I'm not. This isn't any profundity on my part. I mean, this material was discussed back in the 19th century, by people of whether they were Catholic or Protestant, and of course, you have your peripheral groups. You have your Gnostics and your Theosophists. They're all interacting with ancient texts, and they're talking about passages like that in a positive way with respect to other worlds. That was common. If you had a Christian audience, I could give you names like Timothy Dwight, who was the president of Yale, very famous Protestant, theologian. Chalmers, very famous Presbyterian preacher. I mean, they talk publicly about there being other worlds and that this was a good thing, and of course there are, and blah 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 blah. I mean, you just don't see that today because we're on the other side of not only Darwin, but we're on the other side of people who use Darwin as a wedge against faith. Again, none of these things are necessarily connected, but they are used and abused in certain contexts and in certain discussions, and it has really soured the disposition of a lot of Jews and Christians against the whole idea. Muslims, I think, have a little less of a problem with it. There you could argue for intervention. Yeah. By the way, in the Quran, I mean, you could argue that you don't have as much leeway for extraterrestrial intervention in the course of human life and history. You do have it again. There's a little bit of a crack, door crack open there in the Quran. Not so much in the Christian Bible or the Hebrew Bible for Jews, but still,
what do you make of the Nephilim, though?
Oh, the Nephilim again. I don't know. To this day, I don't know where Sitchin got his people of the fiery rockets thing. I mean, that's just nutty. I mean,
he was reading the subtitles.
I don't know what he was. He wasn't doing any Hebrew work, I can tell you that.
Absolutely not.
The Nephilim are in Genesis 6 are cast as, again, in a literal, let's put it this way, in one of two possible literal readings, cast as the offspring of the sons of God, which is a phrase that is used elsewhere in the Hebrew Bible for divine beings. And so you have this
here's
divine
the funny
human cohabitation.
Sons of God, but it's not the same analogy as angels. So is this another offshoot or another species?
See, you're correct in that, because you'll never see the word, you'll never see malach, angel, in the same passage or tied to the other phrase, sons of God.
Exactly.
You don't have a textual overlap there. My own view is that your base term Elohim is not, contrary to what most Judeo-Christian thinkers and preachers want to believe, really a position they've inherited historically. It's not about a unique set of attributes. I mean, we as English speakers, we say the word, we pronounce God, God, and we think of a specific set of attributes because that's what we're taught. And there's only one of those, because if there wasn't, only one, then you can't have a unique set of attributes. Well, the problem is that the biblical writers use Elohim of 5 different things other than the God of Israel. And so it can't refer, by definition, it can't refer to a specific set of attributes. What Elohim really is it denotes sort of its realm distinction. It denotes your place of address, the realm you belong to. In other words, if you're an Elohim, you are, by definition, not human, not part of the natural terrestrial world. You're in the, quote, spiritual realm. You're a disembodied spiritual being, which is why Elohim can be used of like the disembodied dead in 1 Samuel 28:13. They had their own logic for it that we don't have. Well, that's the base term. You're one of those guys. You live over there. You're from that realm.
Now, is there a possibility?
Sons of God is a hierarchical term for how things get done.
Sorry, Michael, let's cut you off, but real quickly on the Elohim, could that have not been a mistranslation of what aliens could be, and maybe they just thought they were?
Well, if you were an ancient person, you
would have no reference what an alien is.
Right, you'd have no frame of reference, and so you could conclude that. But what I would expect of the ancient people writing the texts would be some indication that there's only one Elohim that is uncreated in Hebrew thinking, in biblical thinking. Pardon me. And that is, the God of Israel. The other Elohim, by definition, are created beings. They're made of something, because you can only have one uncreated being.
Right.
So what I would expect is a little more commentary on they came from XYZ place, maybe a specific star, or they came in a craft. It's one of the oddest things in ancient material, the Bible, for example. You never have these beings sort of coming, in craft and leaving, and they don't require this. They just sort of show up.
Right.
And so that's something that if we were dealing with a biological entity, that I would expect to see and don't. So on the one hand,
well, none of they have transporters like on Star Trek,
right?
Beam me down, Scotty. You don't need to see the ship.
On the one hand, I think an ancient person would have thought that way, but I would think they would have said more about. I mean, they talk a lot about their God and other gods and all this stuff all the time, and so do other ancient texts. I think we just get a sort of a better picture, or at least the picture that we're prone to expect with the need to travel and all these other properties of a biological entity. You don't really get that. You don't really get they need the gods need to perpetuate their species. They need hydration. They need nutrition. I mean, they can do certain physical things, but you never get like this. You never get the idea again, and maybe it's just our modern mind that if we're dealing with a biological entity, there are a set of things that must be true according to science as we know it. So there's a bit of a scientific and a pre-scientific disconnect there. But the picture that I would think an ancient person is capable of expressing those things, and you just don't get that, which is again sort of odd. It's a disconnect.
It really is. Lou is still hanging on with us. I know Lou had a very important question he wanted to ask you. Lou, you're on still with us. Ask Dr. Heiser here your question.
Thank you. First, I just want to say to, I guess, you, Jackal, and Alan, and to Eugene, you have to get this guy on for more than just 1 hour.
Oh, no kidding.
I don't think 2 hours does him justice. Well, the quick question is, could Dr. Heiser take some of the money that Angel is paying him tonight and
No. That's the only way I can get a quality guest like Dr. Heiser. Really, I unloaded the Brinks trucks in front of this man's house, and thank you for being here.
Could he take some of that money and have his...
It's all Monopoly money, by the way, but go ahead.
Ms. Chasky run an analysis of Moore's handwriting or writing style, as we were discussing in the previous hour with Alejandro, and to see if Moore actually did compose the most significant MJ12 documents. And I'll just want to mention that years ago I heard Dr. Heiser talk about Brad Sparks and Barry Greenwood's report in the 2007 MUFON, and I know that that's underlying Alejandro's work. So I just wanted to thank him for letting me know about that years ago. So that was my primary question. And if not, assuming you can't afford to do it quickly, who do you suspect actually did write them, if there is one or just a few people? So thank you for your time.
Well, I am the last question is a little shorter. I mean, I am dependent on the work of people like Alejandro and others who, again, have followed the breadcrumb trail back to a few characters that, again, have confessed to certain things and therefore look like really good candidates, for some of this other. I don't know if your listeners know a little bit about the history of what I had done with the Majestic documents, but I knew of someone. Her name is Carol Chasky. She's a Ph.D. Forensic linguist, and her doctoral project was writing a computer program to test something that she would refer to, and others would refer to in the field of computational linguistics as authorship attribution. And that is if you have a document, or you actually need more than one, but it depends what you want to do. But if you have documents that are authored by a known person, her software program that she wrote, and she does this for a living. She's she's an expert witness in all sorts of court cases, and did so and so author this document, or did they not, and things like that. So she has a long track record of having her work validated in court. The idea being that if you take the known and you put it, into her software program, it will look for patterns. It will detect patterns, and not in vocabulary, not in the words, the verbs and the nouns and the things that you could fake if you wanted to fake a document. I'm going to talk about this particular thing. It's in things like your conjunctions, your prepositions, even your punctuation, if you wanted to go down that far, that you would have to spend most of your life analyzing someone's work to be able to fake that. So you take the knowns and you get these patterns, and then you take documents that claim a particular authorship. In the case of the Majestic documents, there are certain documents that have an author attached to them. And then you run that material, that text, and then you see if there are matches. Okay? So what I asked her to do was, again, I a bunch of these, I don't know, it was 8 or 9 different authors, and we had known examples from Hillenkotter or Truman or whoever it was, and then we ran them against the unknowns, and the Majestic documents did very poorly in the results of that test. Now, what I wanted to do is akin to what the caller just asked. After I gave this report away for free, and I spoke in Roswell on it at one conference. The idea was, look, Carol said, because I paid her, I don't know, it was like $1,800, $2,000. I mean, it was basically everything I had at the time, but I figured, somebody needs to do this. And, and she deserves to get paid for her work. So I said, well, how much would it cost to do a fuller set of tests and look for this and look for that? And she gave me a number, and it was like $5,000. So I went on coast to coast and said, look, here's the research. If you want this done, we set up a donation thing, to raise money for this. I'm not kidding. I got $20.
Wow.
Wow.
$20 that I returned. Obviously, I'm not going to keep $20.
That's insulting, actually. Yeah.
I got $20. Well, what it taught me was that people really don't, I hate to say it, a lot of people just don't want the truth.
Yeah, that's true.
It just hurts, and so, but I will tell the questioner, the caller, Lou, that the idea to match against Moore or Doty or people like this, that isn't actually part of what I asked her to do. So maybe I could go back to her and say, are you still interested? I mean, it's been 7 years, since we did this. I don't know if she's still interested or not. But that would be a really intriguing thing to do. I mean, I could ask her if she's still interested, and we could try it again. I mean, now that was the date we didn't have Kickstarter. Might be a good thing to do with Kickstarter, because I want give the money to Carol and let her go to town on things, and it's an intriguing possibility. I just there were other things I wanted her to do, because she could do 2 or 3 other layers of testing to really get very granular results on certain things, and that's what I was thinking of. I wasn't thinking of a candidate. But your caller is right. We got some good candidates now. It might be worth investigating that and asking her.
Well, this is dark matter radio as well, so there's a lot of hosts that could plumb for your Kickstarter, including Art Bell when he comes back to the radio.
That's true. It is a different world than it was 7 years ago. The internet, is considerably larger and more sophisticated. And
united us all. Michael, united us all. It really has.
Right.
It is a global uniter to the internet.
In many ways, it is. In many ways, it is.
I would encourage you to do that.
It's a good idea. Yeah, it is a good idea.
Well, that was my fundamental question. So thanks for your time. And again, I want to thank you for all the information you're putting out. I know free. I think I bought some documents from you years ago, but I certainly appreciate it. I'm familiar with your website. So,
well, thanks. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Good evening. Thanks for calling in, Lou. Thanks for calling in again, by the way.
Talk to you. Bye.
That's a great Lou. Great caller. Guys, we're almost out of time. Michael, we have to have you back on the show here. This has been so much fun. The hour's just flown by. Like I said, you're the type of guest that you want to have on for 3-4 hours. I know I wouldn't want to actually do that to you because you're a busy man. I know you're busy schedule, but we have to have you back on soon to continue this conversation, because it's just been phenomenal having you on. Thank you so much for being on here.
Yeah, thanks for inviting me.
Yeah, it was great definitely having you in here.
Now, let's give out the websites real quick again, so anybody listening in, they can go ahead and check out everything that you've worked on, sitchiniswrong.com. What other websites?
Well, the main website to go to is DR, as in doctor, DRMSH. Those are my initials. So drmsh.com. If you go to that page, you'll see links right up front to everything else I do, including Sitchin. Sitchin would be listed under my Paleobabble link. Paleobabble is a blog that I run about weird things that people believe about the ancient world, and UFO religions. That's another blog. Naked Bible is for biblical study. So I do 3 blogs. I would suggest, though, that when they go up to drmsh.com, put in /links and then -2. And there are all sorts of links that gather all kinds of ancient astronaut sort of things, and MJ12 research links that I think people would find really, really useful.
Very, very cool. Once again, thank you so much for being on here. And guys, we're all out of time here on the Dark Matter Radio Network. Unfortunately, we have to sign off for the evening or the morning or whatever. We will be back next week with another great show. By the way, please check out that Kickstarter account from Dan Martin, the food, organic, free food stuff. That's great, great stuff there. So please check them out. And yeah, Michael, definitely look into Kickstarter. Or one of these things. I will. It's a really good idea. It's just something that 7 years ago I didn't consider, and it's just a good idea. It's amazing how technology is just giving us all these outlets to do these things. But it's great work. Dr. Heiser, keep up the great work, my friend. Keep up what you're doing, and we definitely want to have you back on here. Guys, we're signing off for the evening. This is Skywatchers Radio. Thank you for listening. Keep your eyes on the skies. We'll be back next week.